Hey everybody, happy draft weekend and welcome to episode 53 of Sports Speak. I'm Eddie Kalegi.
And I'm Tim Moore.
We have a lot to break down. We've got a panel here. We're joined by the host of the Experts of Racing Sportscast, Joshua Franks. We're also joined by the host of the Nothing But Sports podcast, Rahill Jaiswal, and Zoe Alter, a regular contributor here on the Sports Speak, will be joining us momentarily. But a lot to talk about. Of course, the first two picks, we knew it was going to happen with Trevor Lawrence and Zach Wilson, but a lot of craziness after that. Before we actually even get to the draft, Tim, let's talk a little about this Aaron Rodgers fiasco, because some people are saying maybe not think this is that big of a deal and kind of brush it off like the Russell Wilson situation. But from the reports that have been coming through for the last couple of days, it really seems like the relationship has been completely frayed and fragmented there in Green Bay for the reigning NFL MVP, and it's disappointing for that team. But, you know, they've kind of put themselves in this place. We've talked about it before. They simply won't draft weapons for him. He makes do with what he has. But once again, they draft a defensive player in the first round, and they're really not providing Aaron Rodgers with the help he needs to get them over the hump in the NFC.
Yeah, you know, it's funny when I think about it, and I know obviously these two have been paired together for a long time, but bear with me for a second if I say this kind of reminds me of a situation in regards to the fact that this is simply the annoying ex-girlfriend that just simply won't ever leave. I mean, even if you wanted to keep Aaron Rodgers and this situation had a chance of being repairable, they killed it again in the first round, drafting a defensive back. I mean, yeah, okay, I guess in the second round, they got Aaron Rodgers, a quote-unquote wide receiver, but that's not doing anything for him at this point. You know, I think Aaron is, as a player, and I do have to commend him, especially getting to know him a little bit more from a personal perspective through the Pat McAfee show this year and what fans got to see and why Aaron Rodgers is a fan favorite, not just because he's playing the football field. I think you get to see a little bit Aaron in regards to the standards he holds himself to. And, you know, he's very invested in Green Bay. But the fact of the matter is that if he's a person that's not treated correctly in a proper way, he's going to hold a grudge. He's going to have a problem. You know, a lot of people are throwing rumors saying, "Oh, Aaron Rodgers should go to San Francisco, go back and play home." But let's also not forget too that he had a big problem in San Francisco. You know, when old Coach McCarthy was there for a little bit, and then that obviously led over to Green Bay because he felt that he should have been playing right there at home. And needless to say, he found himself over with the Packers because they didn't give him a chance. So to me, the fact of the matter, though, is that Aaron's going to be upset, and you got to trade him. Now, if it's Denver, to me, again, this still just doesn't make sense, and I know that was a heavily rumored team. You just traded for Teddy Bridgewater. I'm not saying that they can't trade for a quarterback, but it's like, okay, so what is Green Bay going to get in return? Drew Lock, maybe? Or do you trade Teddy, who you just traded for? So to me, that's a little bit confusing. You know, I know Aaron Rodgers can make average receivers look good. I personally don't think the Denver receiving core, even with Sutton and a couple other guys that look solid, I don't think they're over the top receivers. I think Denver has a lot more problems, especially with that offensive line and the aging defense, such as guys like Von Miller, that they have to deal with before they even become a Super Bowl contender. So I wouldn't necessarily jump to that conclusion if they trade for Rodgers. But needless to say, I mean, for Aaron, in conclusion, I think that no matter what team he goes to, they're going to be a good football team because they have a good quarterback. I just hope they have an offensive line that can protect him and at least some solid wide receivers. I mean, if I'm being honest, that's all Aaron has wanted. He hasn't asked for much. I mean, since Jordy Nelson and Randall Cobb have left and they've gone through transition, yeah, sure, he's had Devontae Adams, but even he was there during that era with both Nelson and Cobb. People forget about that. He just wants some new targets to develop and get better. And I think the fact of the matter is there's a lot better locations, I think, offensively for him that are going to suit him outside of Green Bay. And I think he's going to be traded and things are going to be just fine.
Well, yeah, I think we're trending towards that. But the thing, too, with all this, Denver, you mentioned it, there's not many assets that they have that are much better than what Green Bay has to offer. They're in a more difficult division, I'd argue, with Kansas City obviously there, the Chargers on the rise, the Raiders not a terrible team either. You've got to deal with not having the best receiving core. There's nothing that much more exciting that Denver offers offensively than what he already has in Green Bay. I also think coaching-wise, they don't have a terrible coach right now over in Green Bay right now, so I don't really know what the benefits would be. I'll take this over to Josh Franks at this point. Where do you think Aaron Rodgers would fit best in the NFL? Do you see him ultimately being traded before the season starts?
Well, whenever I talk about it, and we were talking about this on the podcast whenever the original reports were coming out when we were doing our watch party about him possibly getting traded, the idea, of course, was Denver. You have guys like KJ Hamler, Jerry Jeudy, a lot of young receivers that could develop into top star receivers of the next few years with the right people around them. And, of course, bringing in a veteran quarterback like Aaron Rodgers on a team who has had quarterback troubles now. But I just don't see that making much sense with Teddy Bridgewater and Drew Lock still there unless they're thinking about trading one of those guys out. One team that I'm looking at as well, I'm not sure how they'd be able to do it, but I think New Orleans, they were possibly thinking about trading into the top 10 during the draft. There's reports of that coming out. They just lost Drew Brees. They have Jameis Winston and Taysom Hill, neither of which I think can jump right into a starting role and fill the shoes of Drew Brees. So who would be better than Aaron Rodgers to go down there and fit right into that offense? I think he'd do great there. And the Saints, I mean, that's not a bad division, even though the Buccaneers are there. They're in all teams there are in similar holes where they're missing some guys outside of the Buccaneers who are now they drafted Kyle Trask last night to be the heir apparent, it seems like, to Tom Brady and see if he can develop. So that whole division, if you put Aaron Rodgers in there, that could be a great show for all these football fans of the Falcons, Panthers, Saints, and Buccaneers, because that would be one scary division and a lot of entertaining football down there.
Absolutely. But the thing also to consider, if Green Bay is going to make a trade, I don't see them trading within the NFC, especially to a powerhouse, New Orleans or San Francisco, who are both one quarterback away from being right there with Tampa. But let's focus on the Packers for a second. If Aaron Rodgers does go Rahill, of course, they do have Jordan Love. They have some weapons. They have Devontae Adams. But where do they go from here in a division that does have some weaknesses in the NFC North already, a lot of uncertainty in Chicago, Detroit, and Minnesota? What do the Packers do now in the future?
I mean, if you're going to trade him, you try and get what you can for him, probably a couple first-round picks, maybe some help on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, I don't think you really need – if you're going to go with Jordan Love, you also need another wide receiver, because Jordan Love is not going to be able to make Marquez Valdez-Scantling and Lazard look as good as they are. That's only capable if you have a great quarterback like that. Also, just maybe some more stability and more depth on the offensive line. You don't want Jordan Love being thrown out there and taking big hits in his first couple games. But I'm going to throw out another interesting team. I don't know how they'll be able to do this, but what about Pittsburgh? Replace Ben Roethlisberger with Aaron Rodgers, and all of a sudden you've got good offensive weapons. You got now Najee Harris, Juju Smith-Schuster, Chase Claypool. You got a couple good wide receivers, and that defense, even though it was still injured, was still pretty good. So that would be another case to go. But again, I think the one downside would be the division now, because you have the Ravens. And then now you have the Browns, who are just getting stronger, and then the Bengals, who are going to eventually come up. So, but the Pittsburgh would be another interesting option, I'd say.
Yeah, so let's focus on the actual draft. Like I said, we knew what was going to happen with the first two picks. Trevor Lawrence to Jacksonville, Zach Wilson to the Jets. Rahill, Tim, and I actually on Rahill's podcast did a mock draft, went through the entire first round, 2 hours. It's a long thing, but we did have some surprises, obviously, that we really didn't expect to happen. And, of course, the biggest story is what happened with those other quarterbacks. Now, Tim, you had Mac Jones slipping all the way to New Orleans. See, he fell, but not nearly that far, and he got picked up by the Patriots. You and I both had them drafting Justin Fields. I had them trading up for him, but Mac Jones is now the Patriots quarterback. And the more that I think about it, Tim, I feel like he could be a good fit. And when you look at his playing style, he really embodies what Tom Brady had. And he's an underrated quarterback from a big college football program, similar to what Tom Brady, what his position was 20 years ago. So do you think that he's a good fit for the future of New England?
Well, yeah, I think you have to remember too. Both Bill Belichick and Nick Saban have a very strong relationship as well off the football field. In terms of communication, because a lot of those defensemen that Bill's gone through over the years have come from Alabama. And I think the fact of the matter is this: I think Mac Jones has a good coach that fits the similar style from Nick Saban. That's strict and has a direct direction and path that he wants his players to go. I'm not expecting though Mac Jones to jump out and be anything spectacular throughout his first season, but I always say this about first-year quarterbacks, and the thing is simply this: you don't have to win to be a good quarterback. I think Justin Herbert, for example, proved that very well. Those that are good quarterbacks show something early, and I'm not saying that they win early. They're not completely successful early, but they show some explosive plays. They show in some moments that they're developing and getting better. If I can see that from Mac Jones early on, even if he's not starting right away behind Cam Newton, but early on when he gets opportunities and throughout the preseason, you'll know immediately if you have something special right there. Tom Brady, and I understand he's the greatest of all time, and it's hard to compare him in regards to that fact with Mac, but you could tell from Tom right away when he got his opportunities that there's something special there. And obviously, yes, the Patriots went on to win games, but even if they weren't winning, let's say in that instance, you could tell Tom can make certain plays or whatever, and you can have trust with him on the football field. If that happens with Mac Jones, then they have something pretty set. But in terms of going from Alabama to New England, that's probably the best case scenario for him, because in my opinion, the how things are handled are a lot similar, because there's no one like Nick Saban in the NCAA, and Bill Belichick's the next nearest, needless to say, in the NFL.
Yeah, Nick Saban and Bill Belichick also go back when Belichick was the coach of the Cleveland Browns. Nick Saban was an assistant under him a long way ago. Not a lot of Alabama players have made their way to New England, but of course they got a great one in a quarterback. But let's talk about another quarterback. I'll start with Rahill on this one, with Trey Lance getting picked over both Justin Fields and Mac Jones to take the number 3 overall pick. I thought the 49ers were going to end up drafting Mac Jones. I think Trey Lance is a good move, but of course there is a pretty low floor with him because there's not much of a sample size. He did not play much. North Dakota State, of course, the FCS season was moved to the spring this year, so there was not really much game footage, game tape of him over the past year, with him becoming a more experienced quarterback. But that being said, North Dakota State has a long lineage. Carson Wentz coming out just a few years ago. How do you feel about this Trey Lance move to San Francisco? I'll start here with Rahill.
I like him over Mac Jones. I don't like him over Justin Fields. I personally think Justin Fields would have probably, if we were doing this from the start without all the reports, I would have said Justin Fields would go number 3 overall, because he has so much game tape. He's played so many big games. But Trey Lance is so interesting because, I mean, you look at his highlights and you almost feel like, how can you not draft him? He's big, strong. He can make the throws. He can run people over. But you said it yourself that you just don't have much tape on him. And now it's a real big boomer bust situation. But I think he goes to a good. The main important thing for these quarterbacks is to go to a good situation. I think San Francisco is the best situation out of all the quarterbacks right now. You go there with Kyle Shanahan, who's been known as a QB whisperer. They're going to get their defense back to full strength, and they've got some good offensive weapons, and they do like to run the football. They like to, throw a lot of crazy schemes at you and stuff. And I think Trey Lance will fit in well there, but we're going to see how it pans out further down the line. I think he'll have the best rookie season, but I don't know after that. It's a real risk, especially considering let's not forget how much they gave up to get to number 3. They gave up 2 first-rounders. So it's a real risk to go out there and take Trey Lance.
Absolutely. But you mentioned it, the 49ers, compared to all 5 quarterbacks that got drafted in the first round, that team, let's not forget, they just went to the Super Bowl the year before this. They got derailed last season because of so many injuries. George Kittle was hurt. They lost so many defensive players for the season in just the first couple of weeks. Dee Ford was hurt. Bosa was hurt. And, of course, not having Jimmy Garoppolo, they had to run C.J. Beathard and Nick Mullins out there. None of them really capable as NFL quarterbacks. But, Franks, you were very high on Trey Lance, and he ended up getting drafted here number 3. Do you think this is a good fit for San Francisco?
I think as far as the scheme fit, I definitely do. I like Fields a little bit more in that system to be able to make the deep throws, because that was the main thing that cost them the Super Bowl, in my opinion, was Jimmy Garoppolo missing those deep throws. We saw that especially in that Clemson game when Ohio State was able to beat Clemson and move on to the national championship. We saw Justin Fields playing hurt, making similar types of throws that Jimmy Garoppolo was missing on. So I thought he would be the better scheme fit, but of course I do like Trey Lance in that system. Time will only tell how he can perform. A lot of pressure will be taken off of them because they are a run-heavy offense. They run a lot of West Coast stuff there in San Francisco that we saw when Kyle Shanahan was the offensive coordinator for Atlanta as well. My concern is with him is, once again, I still feel like Justin Fields, in my opinion, he was my second-ranked quarterback. Zach Wilson was third. Fourth was Trey Lance. And then all the way down the sixth was Mac Jones. I didn't even think Mac Jones deserved to go in the first round, in my opinion, after seeing his pro day and a lot of the tape that he had. I just didn't see it there. But Trey Lance going 3, I love it as a scheme fit, and I'm excited to see where it goes.
So I'm actually curious. I'm going to go back to you here because we were talking about Mac Jones, but some of us, I think, have been a little higher on him, especially me and Rahill. Of course, Tim had him slipping down. You mentioned the pro day. What other things do you think with Mac Jones in terms of fitting in New England? Do you think is he really prepared to be an NFL quarterback, especially if they give him an opportunity week 1 over Cam Newton?
I don't see that being a possibility. I see a near Patrick Mahomes style development path for him to where he'll sit for a majority of his first year. I see him battling with Jarrett Stidham. I like Jarrett Stidham. I think they're very close together as far as how ready they are, especially with Stidham sitting there for a while as well. So being able to learn under Cam Newton, I think it's a good situation for him to try to go there and try to learn. I still don't like how high that he went. I feel like the Patriots possibly could have got him in the second round, in my opinion, just because I still don't like how high he went. I still think he was a second round talent style quarterback. But the Patriots were still able to get their guy, and I think it's a good system fit for them. It's just going to be time will tell for him because he doesn't have the same amount of weapons or the same quality of weapons that he had when he was in college. You think they had 4 first-round receivers or 4 guys who could go in the first round? The majority of them, Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith, went above him in this year's first round. So that just tells you the entire story when we look at the quality of weapons he had. It's just going to be interesting to see how he can transition into the NFL.
Yeah, Patriots losing Julian Edelman, had a lot of banged up receivers. They did bring in Jonnu Smith from Tennessee, which should help things out. They did spend some money, got a couple of guys, but of course not the weapons that he had. And we'll get back to those Alabama receivers that got drafted. But Tim and Rahill, I think it's time we talk about the New York Giants here, because let's take it back to draft night. I was texting with you guys in the Bruce Beck Camp group chat, and Tim started freaking out when the Giants made that trade at first, but then you felt a little better about it afterwards when you realized the picks that Dave Gettleman got afterwards. So looking at these first 2 days of the draft, how do you feel the Giants have done so far?
You know, I feel like they've done a really good job. And yeah, I freaked out because, to my understanding, at least, because I wasn't physically looking at the TV, I was just listening. And I think it was Booger McFarland that said, oh, yeah, they're getting a first round for next year. And I think it was a 4th or whatever it was, also for next year. So I'm like, we traded out of the first round for next year, not for this year. And it ticked me off a little bit. But then when I found out we got a first-round pick for this year as well, that's where I felt a little bit more relaxed. Listen, I know Dave Gettleman wanted Devontae Smith, and I applaud him in that scenario for trading down to 20. Do I think Kadarius Toney was a risk at 20? Yeah. I feel like you could have got him probably in the second round. But, and I know Rahill's going to feel the same way about this, if we didn't get Aziz there in that second round, it would have definitely felt like a bust. Like that trade would have not have worked out. And especially if the Giants, again, basically trading back again in that second round. So the fact of the matter is we got our guys, and I'm really glad for the Giants. You know, at first I wasn't really aware too much of, you know, who Kadarius Toney fully was of his play style. But as he got to learn about him a little bit more, get to see a couple of his highlights, you could tell he's an elusive type of player, very explosive, and he's what the Giants need in the short game. Obviously, we just got Kenny Golladay, who's a more physical receiver with contested balls. Sterling Shepard's that slot guy. I don't care what anyone says about John Ross. He's nothing but a special teamer, in my opinion. And Darius Slayton, when he can catch a ball, is also pretty effective, especially as a deep threat. So I think the Giants got a good wide variety of receivers here, which is what we needed. I know it's not Devontae Smith. Eddie, by the way, I hate the Eagles still for that. No offense. But it ticks me off a little bit. But I'll say the Giants' first 2 rounds, and really 3 rounds overall. I haven't seen what they're going to draft in the 6th round yet, but the first 3 rounds really solid, addressing our problems of receiver, edge rusher, and also cornerback. So I think this team has a lot more depth. And again, I know the expectations for the Giants are low considering past years, but I really do truthfully mean this. And I hate that I'm putting expectations on them, but this year it is wild card minimum or bust, because this team cannot continue to develop like this and not make the playoffs. So we'll see what it does. And a lot of the pressure now goes on to Daniel Jones.
Yeah, because it feels like the Giants have just been constantly in this loop of trying to retool after they won 2 Super Bowls in 5 years. And they retooled initially. They bring in Odell Beckham. That doesn't really work out. They retool again with Saquon Barkley. That hasn't paid off. Now that seems like they're retooling for a 3rd time. But Rahill, when we did our mock draft, we all had Aziz going in the 1st round. So the fact that the Giants were able to get him in round 2, pretty solid. So how would you evaluate their performance so far with the draft?
Yeah, I was shocked that he was still there at 50, and then we were getting close. I think we were at pick 40, and then all of a sudden I found out they traded back again, and I was a little ticked off at first, because I was thinking you had Ronnie Perkins as well there on the board with Jeremiah from Notre Dame, and I was thinking, why are you trading back? And then all of a sudden, I think I don't know, maybe Dave Gettleman knew that no one was going to pick one of those 3, so he moved back a couple picks, and it worked out. And so yeah, I'm really happy that we got him at 50. I thought that was a steal, considering a lot of people had him the 2nd or 3rd best edge rusher in the draft. Now he did have, I know he had some injury issues, but he said he feels perfectly fine, and I'm really excited. And as far as the Kadarius Toney pick, I know Tim, when we first had the pick, he was not happy about it. I was a little shocked at it first. I was like, if you're going to go wide receiver, why don't you go Elijah Moore, out of Ole Miss? And I was thinking, who I had never heard of Kadarius Toney before, but it's easy to get overshadowed when you're playing on the same team as Kyle Pitts in the same offense. And I felt a lot better once I went out and Googled his highlights and saw 3 captions that said the shiftiest player in the SEC. I was thinking, oh, okay, this guy's got some explosive ability. Now, if you think about it, it makes sense. They trade back because they know, once they don't get Devontae Smith, they know he's not going to, there's no point picking him that high in the draft. You trade back with the Bears, who give you a 1st rounder, and then, you give Daniel Jones some more weapons. And also, he's not a polished product as of yet. So I'm expecting to have a huge rookie season. He's probably not going to win, offensive rookie of the year. I don't think he'll have a huge rookie season, but Joe Judge was a wide receiver coach in New England. So if he can just polish off his route running, he can be dangerous. He can maybe take the top off of defenses. I don't know, but I like the pick. He's got a lot of potential. So I think the Giants have done a very good job in the first 2 rounds of this draft.
Yeah, so let's shift gears. Of course, I've got to talk about my Philadelphia Eagles. That, what did I say on your podcast, by the way, Rahill? I told you, no matter what, they're picking a wide receiver in the 1st round. That's how they trend towards, and that's what happened once again. But I'm not upset about that. Devontae Smith, great receiver. Of course, he just won the Heisman Trophy in Alabama. People have been ranking Waddle a little higher than him, but nonetheless, getting Devontae Smith, the fact that he fell to the Eagles and they ended up trading with the Cowboys of all teams to move up 2 spots and grab Devontae Smith ahead of the Giants. Sorry to spite you guys, but I was pretty excited about that. But the one thing that still concerns me, they fixed a lot of their issues, but the biggest problem with the Eagles is their unhealthy, banged-up secondary, which they did not address on the 1st or 2nd day of the draft. They have 4 primary holes. They fixed 3 of them, but I'd argue that they did not fix the most glaring one. Maybe you could say that the offensive line is a problem as well, of course, with the aging and the injuries that we saw last season. They did get Hunter Dickinson from Alabama, second rounder, won some awards there as one of the top offensive linemen in the SEC. Great pick for them overall, bringing him in, and they did get a defensive tackle, but there were so many great corners. They kind of got messed up. I feel like they might have considered J.C. Horn potentially if he was around, but he did get drafted a little earlier than we all had him in our mock draft when he got taken by Carolina. But overall, this could have gone a whole lot worse for the Eagles. So I'm not too upset, but I feel like the secondary is still something they really need to address. But Joshua Franks, I'm going to turn it over to you because you mentioned it already. Alabama now has a pageantry of bringing receivers in. 4 first-round picks that have been wide receivers in the last 2 years. What do you see from Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith, and who do you think becomes the better NFL receiver?
Well, looking at Jalen Waddle, the one thing that I was concerned with is his durability. We saw it a lot in college. He was a great receiver, but I think he was drafted a little high for his durability. I'm actually surprised he went that early. A lot of people actually mocked him to go to 7 to the Lions because nobody expected Sewell to drop in past 5 with the Bengals, and a lot of people assumed that Jamar Chase would go there to 6. So Jalen Waddle pretty much would fall into the lap of the Lions was the look right here. But overall, the guy that I had number 1 on my overall board that I feel like is the most pro-ready as far as how pro-style offenses are now is Devontae Smith. I think he's better than Jamar Chase, especially with that year that he took off. He's the Heisman winner. I mean, first receiver in years to win the Heisman. And now coming into the NFL, he's going to the Eagles team who has desperately needed a number 1 receiver. And he's going to get matched up with another Alabama player, that being Jalen Hurts, who I think we can all agree should and will be the starter there for the Philadelphia Eagles. I think that'll be a good fit for him, and I'm excited to see. Of course, there's still a few holes, like you mentioned, on the defense for the Eagles, but I think that Devontae Smith will have a good career. I think he'll be the best receiver out of this draft. And Jalen Waddle, only time will tell and see if he can stay healthy here in the NFL.
Yeah, Jalen Waddle, a lot of comparisons to Tyreek Hill in terms of his speed and his explosiveness, but Devontae Smith is one of the best pass catchers that we've seen come out of the draft. We have 2 really exceptional pass catchers that were both drafted here, with Kyle Pitts going to the Falcons and then Devontae Smith going to Philly. With the Eagles, I mentioned it on your podcast, Rahill, they've had a really messed up receiving core. Deshaun Jackson, Alshon Jeffrey, last 2 years, they've only played 3 games together. Those were supposedly their top 2 receivers. Jalen Reagor became more so of a special teams guy last season than actually catching a lot of passes. And then you've got Greg Ward Jr., who was just a quarterback in a folded football league that somehow became a wide receiver here. So still some concerns with the Eagles, but pretty happy with that move. But I want to Zoe Alter is going to be joining us in a few minutes, by the way. She'll be talking about the Lions, and we'll discuss Justin Fields. But I want to go through with each of you your biggest surprise from the first round. I'm going to start with Tim here on this one.
Well, in regards to biggest surprise, what, the player or the teams?
Just overall, biggest surprise from night 1 of the draft.
To me, if I'm being honest, I think he first kind of started, obviously, the Eagles trading up. I mean, I really expected them to kind of sit back because, again, trade with Dallas, that was a little bit of a surprise. I didn't think the Cowboys were going to trade back, but they knew they were going to get Parsons. So you kind of had an idea that they were going to get a linebacker. And Eddie, you called that right away, if I'm not mistaken. You thought they were going Parsons, just obviously not with their pick. And to me, I thought that was a little bit of a surprise. At that point, I knew the Giants were going to be out of Smith. But I think really the biggest surprise, probably in my opinion, had to be the Panthers taking Horn with that first pick. Because to me, I really thought they were going to go Surtain. I did not think they were going to go with Horn. Surtain looked to be one of the better all-around corners, had the capability, in my opinion, to be the lead corner in that team. And listen, some teams, have some depth. Carolina has 0 depth. They need as much secondary as they can get. Obviously, since they've lost James Bradbury to the Giants, and it hasn't been necessarily the brightest thing over there in one season. But that team really, needs to find ways to get better. Back to Horn, what they're to me, it was a little bit surprising because I think Surtain definitely had the skills to be their next kind of Josh Norman type player. And then other than that, I would say throughout the rest of the first round, and I'll go from a team aspect here. I'm still very surprised the Jets didn't try to trade up for a third pick in that round. I know they obviously did make a move to move up a little bit, but I really thought the Jets had an opportunity to try to, make something more happen. Obviously, they still ended up getting a wide receiver of Elijah Moore in that second round, but I was really convinced the Jets were going to do a lot more in that first, and they ended up not doing so.
Yeah, you actually took the words out of my mouth with my biggest surprise. J.C. Horn going to the Panthers. Everybody was hyping up Surtain. I thought Horn was going to end up going to the Chargers a little bit further down, but the Panthers, I also thought there was a chance, but they might have gone with a receiver just to provide Sam Darnold with some weapons so he wouldn't just be seeing ghosts out there in Carolina. Rahill, over to you. Your biggest surprise from round one of the draft.
The Raiders. Alex Leatherwood was your 17th overall pick. I mean, first of all, the Raiders have a pretty steady offensive line I don't think offensive line was a huge need for them. Second, I was thinking you go pass rush because your defense has been absolutely horrid, especially in this last season. Besides Khalil Mack and pretty much Max Crosby, you pretty much have no one rushing the passer. So, I mean, Jalen Phillips was there for them for the taking, who actually went next pick to Miami. You could have picked him, or, worse, you could have gone other defensive. If you want to take a cornerback, you could have done that. Or maybe you could have taken a wide receiver or something. But if you were going to take Leatherwood, maybe you'd trade back because there was, especially and if you were going to go all O-line, why not Christian Darrisaw, who ended up somehow falling to 23, which was a surprise because people had him, the fourth or best O-lineman in this draft. So that was really surprising. Also, considering Leatherwood is only really I had him going last pick in the first round, but a lot of people have him as maybe a second or third round talent. You take him with pick 17. Hey, if you wanted to pick him, you could have easily traded back with another team who was maybe looking to trade up.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's something to really think about as well. A lot of surprises overall. A lot of teams kind of duped us out from what we expected they would actually do. So finally, Franks, to you, what's your biggest surprise from round one of the draft?
Well, looking at all the picks that had happened, there's so many things you could say. It could be Swool dropping down to the Lions, J.C. Horn going inside the top 10. In my opinion, Justin Fields dropping out. When it comes to Jalen Phillips being the first edge rusher off the board. But in my opinion, overall, the most shocking thing for me, we knew that Jacksonville had a running back, but they take Travis Etienne to match with Trevor Lawrence, the Clemson duo, and they take a running back. We know Urban Meyer has a two-back set. They signed Carlos Hyde as they made this pick. So with the running backs that they now have down there in Jacksonville, to take another running back here in the first round when you have a lot of different glaring needs that are also, offensive line, in my opinion, is a big thing they need. They also need, in my opinion, a more established receiving core, bringing in Trevor Lawrence. I think drafting Travis Etienne, I think it's more of a luxury pick. Me being a Clemson fan, I dreamt of it, but I never saw it happening. And when it did, I thought it was a huge surprise.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of surprises. And, Urban Meyer really values the college game. He's even experimenting with Tim Tebow as a potential tight end after he retired from the Mets. We'll talk about that more in a moment, but let's bring in Zoe Alter now, who's here to join us. Thank you for everybody once again joining us here on Sports Speak, episode 53. Eddie Kalegi here with Tim Moore. We're joined by host of the Experts of Racing Sportscast, Joshua Franks, the host of the Nothing But Sports podcast, Rahill Jaiswal. And now Zoe Alter is also here to join us. And Zoe, we were just finishing up talking about our biggest surprises of the first round, including the Justin Fields pick, J.C. Horn getting picked early by the Panthers. But overall, what was your biggest surprise from night one of the draft?
Okay, well, in a sense, you took it right out of my mouth, but I would say the Justin Fields, and maybe for me it was surprising because it's a little terrifying as a Lions fan to see the Bears draft a quarterback that I know could be really good, but Justin Fields, in my mind, it was weird because he did go kind of early, but I, in my head, in earlier drafts too, had expected him to go earlier. I mean, he was up there as there was talking at one point that the Jaguars were potentially going to take him, like, for a second there. And we always knew it was going to be Trevor Lawrence, don't get me wrong. But there was a little bit of talk with him, and I was surprised that he fell that far. In addition, with everything that had happened this offseason with the Bears and their whole weird offense, QB1 and everything going on with their Twitter and everything there, them getting rid of Mitchell Trubisky, I knew they were looking for a quarterback, but for me, I didn't see them taking Justin Fields. I thought they were going to start somewhere else because I think there's a couple other gaps they could fill in. So that was my surprise of the draft, even though, I don't know, I think that some people may have saw that coming.
Yeah, I know. Justin Fields was a surprise in some ways, but it's also, I think, a pretty risky move. And I'll go to Tim here first. And Matt Nagy, this is really his last chance because he has such a tremendous defense, but has had nothing to show for it for offense. The slime game on Nickelodeon last year in the playoffs really exposed it when they just couldn't complete any passes until literally the last play of the game. And you knew when they signed Andy Dalton, they were not signing him to be a starting quarterback, despite what Bears Twitter said. But bringing in Justin Fields, of course, a risk. And Tim, you and I on Rahill's podcast the other day, were talking about how Ohio State has such a bad lineage when it comes to quarterbacks, with Terrell Pryor and Braxton Miller having to become receivers to even last in the NFL. Nothing happened with Barrett or Cardale Jones. Dwayne Haskins was a bust, but now Justin Fields. So where do you see Justin Fields fitting, and do you think the Bears could potentially be on the rise with him?
I think it could be on the rise in regards to the fact that we still can't forget about the fact that this team still has a solid defense. Now, I think the thing that we have to remember about the Bears, though, is that their cap situation is just simply god-awful. Just like the Philadelphia Eagles, for example, Eddie. There's teams that have a lot of, veteran players, big contracts. The Bears are one of them. And that's a big reason why they traded up as well for the Giants, giving them the following year's first-round pick, because they can't really afford more of these first-round picks. But I will say this for Matt Nagy. This better work out. It really better work out. Because the fact of the matter is, this shows desperation towards his job. I do truthfully believe that Justin Fields could be a good quarterback in the NFL. It's just the fact of the matter of, A, will he have targets? Because if he doesn't, guess what? It's a Sam Darnold situation all over again. And B, does he have protection? Because if he doesn't have protection, he's going to have to be mobile a lot. And just like, for example, like Cardale Jones, you're not going to be successful. It's not going to happen because you're going to be running around like a chicken with your head cut off. Not everyone can be Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson. And for the record, that's not Justin Fields' style. But I will say this again for the Bears. I think they will be a little bit on the rise. I mean, from a Giants fan perspective, I hope they fail. In fact, I hope they're the worst team in the league because number one sounds really nice. But there's a lot on the line. And I feel almost terrible for Andy Dalton, and I can't believe I'm saying that, but he was promised the starting quarterback job. Promised. They promised they would not take anyone in the draft, and they promised him he would be the starter week one. If they don't live to that promise, it'll be like the Green Bay Packers, who can't live to any promise to Aaron Rodgers. Or, Zoe, no offense, the Detroit Lions, who can't live up to any promise, period. The Minnesota Vikings can't live up to any promise of drafting a good offensive player. So it's the NFC North trend in general, in my opinion. But I would imagine Andy Dalton is the week one starter, and he'll eventually lose it probably around week 5 when none of his targets can catch a football to begin with. And then they'll try to be competitive and say, oh, they're developing. And again, they'll be on the rise compared to last year. But really, this era was over once Cody Parkey banged it off the upright twice.
I'm still amazed that team actually made it that far with Mitch Trubisky in the first place to be in that situation. But Franks, you were talking about earlier, you were very high up on Justin Fields as well. Of course, there's a lot of the doubters with him falling, but there's also a lineage in the NFL of these overlooked quarterbacks that fall to the bottom portion of the first round that end up paying off. Russell Wilson, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson. Do you see Justin Fields becoming someone like that? Because I compared him on Rahill's podcast to Kyler Murray in some sense, especially with his mobility, not having as much height, but still having a strong arm. What do you see as the ceiling for Justin Fields in Chicago?
As far as he wants to go, that's the idea for me. I mean, when it came to how I looked at quarterbacks, I mentioned I'm a Clemson fan. I, in some aspects, think he is better than Trevor Lawrence. We've seen it all through them coming up through high school and college. It was always 1A and 1B, and you didn't know which one it was. And that's how I ranked them in this draft, because it's the same thing. He's more mobile than Trevor. I think Trevor has the better arm. But when it comes to overall who I think could be a guy that could, with a weak offensive line, maybe not as many weapons, could lead a offense, I think it's Justin Fields, who can, I mean, he's so mobile. He can roll out of the pocket. I compare him to, looking at Jalen Hurts, looking at, and I know he's not the best look right now, but Deshaun Watson's play style, those type of guys that can roll out, not with many weapons, and still put together a great offensive game. I really like him. Like I said, I had him ranked as my right below Trevor Lawrence at 1A, 1B, or just the number 2 quarterback in this draft. To see him drop past 3, in my opinion, was shocking. I thought he was a perfect fit for the 49ers, but of course it was a coin flip for whatever quarterback that was. And seeing him go to the Bears, I think it's motivation. I mean, we saw it so much with that, how Ohio State came back, and then, of course, him wanting to go somewhere and play, that passion. He left Georgia to go and play at Ohio State. And who was another quarterback that, Justin Fields went to Ohio State? You mentioned all these quarterbacks that have failed at Ohio State and transitioning into the NFL. I want to just put, even though he got hurt, a guy that left Ohio State, found success, and came into the NFL before he got hurt, did amazing, Joe Burrow. So I think this is a switch that we're seeing here, and I think Justin Fields could definitely be a leader for the Chicago Bears for years to come.
So we're all basically in consensus that Justin Fields, it seems like, slipped a little bit, and some teams might have missed out on an opportunity. So Rahill, do you think there are going to be any specific teams that regret passing up on Fields in the first round?
I mean, I'm not sure. I think the main one maybe be the Broncos if this whole Teddy Bridgewater situation doesn't work out. Because Teddy Bridgewater, he's okay. He's not great, but he's not horrible. He can play, but he's okay. I feel like they were really in the need for a quarterback, because I felt like Drew Lock. It's clear that Drew Lock is not the answer yet, and also you go. I mean, they could have gone offensive line as well, but I mean, Tim had him picking a cornerback. But I think the Broncos would probably be the number 1 team that rejects picking him, because Teddy Bridgewater and Drew Lock, they're not that, Drew Lock is horrible. Drew Lock is hot garbage, and Teddy Bridgewater at best is maybe a little above average. So I don't really see why they didn't take him. I mean, he was there for the taking. He was right there. I thought they were going to trade up maybe 2 spots with the Lions, but he was right there for him. They didn't have to trade up, and they passed him. I think it'll be Denver.
I also think John Elway is very hesitant, because now there is such a history over these past few years of the Broncos supposedly scoping out really talented quarterbacks, and it doesn't pay off. Thinking about Drew Lock more recently, but also thinking Paxton Lynch was the answer from Memphis, Trevor Siemian, people who did not really have any capabilities to play in the NFL. But of course, I see the Detroit Lions logo in the back right corner of Zoe's room, and I've saved any talk on Penei Sewell and the Detroit Lions until Zoe arrives. So Zoe, I talked about the Eagles, Tim and Rahill talked about the Giants. Now tell me, how do you feel about how the Detroit Lions did for these first 2 days of the draft?
I love it. Like, going into the draft, I was, if somehow a miracle happens and Jamar Chase falls, sure, take him. You lose Galladay, you have pretty much no receivers, Quintez Cephas just holding up your entire wide receiving core. But because that didn't happen, my next guy on the list was Penei Sewell. And Sewell, I can't even say his name yet. I'll learn it by the season, don't worry. But I was so excited when they got him, because my dad and I were sitting watching the draft, and we both looked at each other and we were like, once we saw Jamar Chase go, we were like, if we don't get Sewell, I'm going to be so angry. And we go, and sure enough, it is Sewell. We had a whole little dance party in our living room. It was fantastic. I am so psyched for him, because in my opinion, I tweeted about it. I don't know if you guys follow me on Twitter. I'm annoying on Twitter, but I tweeted about it because I was really excited about the offensive line. And for the reason, because you have Ragnow, who was an all-pro, now he's so good. You have Decker, and combining that with Sewell, I think that provides great pass protection that helps your run game hugely. Behind that, you also have to remember you have Kerryon and then Swift, who you got last year, who was very good. So in terms of your offensive block right there, I think that's good. Quarterback, a whole nother situation. I don't even know if I can talk about this right now without crying. Like, we're not going to get into that. But in the meantime, it helps a little bit for Goff. And going later into the draft, I love how they were focusing on defense. And sure, there's a thing where, oh, your team just keeps taking tackles. They just take tackles. They take no one else. And sure, maybe you don't get the most elusive wide receiver in the draft. You don't get Kyle Pitts, this crazy tight end. But for me and for a team that's rebuilding, tackles are really exciting. And the Lions D-line, as anyone who has ever seen a Lions game knows, is atrocious. It is horrendous. It is awful. I can't say anything good about it. And in a rebuild, you want to build from the inside out. And I think it's really, really helpful that the Lions are building from the inside out. Dan Campbell knows that he is not going to win by just taking a couple guys here and there and piecing together things. There's a reason why they almost released their whole team over the offseason, and they have to start it back up again. You get these guys who are going to be good. And of course, that wide receiver hole, they get St. Brown, who I love, from USC. You guys know I'm the biggest USC fan. I love that. Has a brother in the NFL already in Equanimous. Fantastic name. We know that for the Packers. They'll play each other, division rivals. And Brashad Perryman wasn't going to carry the load for the Lions. So I think this is a good look. And it's not like he has to be great this year. He has a couple years to develop. He's going to be good. I love the line. And I was excited about the draft. As a Lions fan, the draft is pretty much the most exciting part of my season. So I can be high on the Lions for the next couple months until the season starts and it all goes downhill. And then I can hope for another good draft pick. But with this draft, I'm happy. I love Sewell. And, you know, my Stafford jersey is old. I may need to look into a new jersey. So Sewell's high on my list.
What about Thanksgiving, though, Zoe? I mean, the whole country is watching the Detroit Lions play every Thanksgiving at 12:30. Isn't that a big day for Detroit, too? Even when they lose, usually. Thanksgiving
is great. I love being able to watch them, and it's not like I don't get mocked enough. Everywhere I go, you're a Lions fan? How did that happen? You're not from Detroit? Like, everywhere I go, it's the talk of my life. I just get mocked constantly, and that's okay. But Thanksgiving is just an extension of that. I'm used to them losing, and honestly, I think the fact that you can disguise it as a rebuild actually helps a lot, because you can say, we're not going to go out there and be the best team. It's a rebuild. We're going to be losing. It's the next couple of years are going to suck for us. And that's okay, because it hurts more when you have Matt Stafford, who's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. And you have at one point, what I considered one of the best receiving corps in the league in Galladay, Marvin Jones, Marvin Hall. You know, you had Tate in there at one point. With everything going on there, I considered that one of the best receiving corps in the league. And you still lost in Thanksgiving, and you still couldn't get anything done. And you play your division rivals, you play the Bears, and the Bears embarrass you. For me, that's more embarrassing than anything that could happen. We could score 0 points on Thanksgiving, and I'll still be happy because I know we're getting better. So for Thanksgiving, you can mock me, Eddie, and I know you will, but I will be happy for the future when the Lions eventually win a Thanksgiving game.
All right, well, let's shift gears from the Lions. One more pick before we talk about the Tim Tebow fiasco. Tim and Rahill, you guys both in our mock draft had Najee Harris going to the Pittsburgh Steelers, and it did happen. And Tim specifically, you were highlighting how when the Steelers completely collapsed last season after their great start, a lot of it was because they had no run game. So where do you see the Steelers going this season in a tough AFC North, but now having Harris in that backfield?
Do you want me to be honest? While
yes,
Harris, a great running back, the answer is still nowhere. I don't understand what's going on in Pittsburgh in regards to the fact that, and again, this was my biggest argument, for example, in the baseball and the New York Yankees. When you are complacent, you will not win. This is the NFL. You have to have change on an everlasting basis. And yes, you lost James Conner, you added a running back. But the NFL is so much more different in regards to the fact that it can't be just one side of the football you have to focus on. It has to be all aspects. And to be honest, Pittsburgh, and again, I know the cap's a little bit iffy there too, but, you know, during the offseason, yeah, okay, you brought back Juju Smith-Schuster, that's great, but you didn't answer everything on all aspects of the football like they needed to. Because, yeah, okay, that team started off so great. Then the offense completely fell apart. Let's also not forget the defense after it seemed like, the Dupree injury. They were almost inconsistent as can be. And now the fact of the matter is well, maybe that defense could have been a little bit overrated because of the teams that they played. Because let's be honest, they played a relatively easy schedule. I mean, anytime you play the NFC East, it's an easy schedule. So the fact of the matter is that this team needs to get better. And, I look at Cleveland. Cleveland got better on all aspects of football this offseason. You get yourself another edge rusher, rather regardless how you feel about him, of Jadeveon Clowney. That's another story. But you got yourself an edge rusher. They tried to improve upon their offense here in the draft. And, I even look at Baltimore. Baltimore got themselves another receiver to try to, help out Lamar Jackson. They also got themselves a couple of defensive players. And they even tried, throughout free agency to improve that team just a little bit more. So I think those two are going to be so good for the Steelers. I don't know. I think this team's still going to win football games. I just don't see them getting better than last year because, listen, as far as this team's gone, they've been complacent. They're still the same team they are. And until Ben Roethlisberger retires, nothing against Big Ben, but that team's going to be the same thing. And might I add, too, I understand the Steelers don't fire coaches, but you've had Mike Tomlin there for years, and he's done the same thing year in, year out since that Super Bowl win. It's been literally get to the playoffs, fall apart, get to the playoffs, fall apart, and might I add, very similar ways year in and year out. They need change, and it's honestly not just player, it's perspective, too, in my opinion.
And yeah, Mike Tomlin's a solid coach, but the fact that the Pittsburgh Steelers have had 3 coaches since the 1970s, I mean, come on, you need to make changes eventually. You change your roster eventually. And I'm sorry, for any Steelers fan out there, you had to have been frustrated seeing both Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell playing in the Super Bowl back in February. But last thing, I'm going to go to Zoe to wrap this up because we're both Mets fans. And we've seen the transformation of Tim Tebow from a playoff-winning NFL quarterback to a Wildcat specialist, to the host of Good Morning America, to the host of the Disney World Christmas Parade, to a player in the Mets organization that never actually made it to the majors, to now potentially being a Taysom Hill-style tight end to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Do you think this is something we're actually going to see? And do you think this is like we're actually going to see Tim Tebow in an NFL game, in a regular season game?
Tim Tebow wasn't athletic enough to even play above the minor league level. He was not brought into the dugout. He didn't even perform in spring training. And you expect him to have half the athleticism that Taysom Hill has? I don't even know how to. I'm out of words for this one. Tim Tebow couldn't even make it as a quarterback. And I know you need to know roots and things like that. But as a tight end in this league, you need to be 1, big, you need to be 2, athletic, and you need to be 3, able to actually do something. And I don't think Tim Tebow meets any of those categories. It's not that I hate the guy. I would have liked to see him play baseball. But in my opinion, and I think everyone's opinion, baseball is a lot less physical than football. And if he couldn't even get anywhere in baseball, and it took him long enough, believe me, he had all the chances in the world. If he couldn't even do anything in baseball, I see absolutely zero chance that he gets anything done in football. Not to mention, a lot of people go to baseball when they're older. You see baseball players play older. Tim Tebow's on the older side. He's not a young man anymore. He's not, someone that just came out of college and is fresh. He's played. He's had his share of injuries. And the league's changed since he last played. He's been out of it for what? I don't even know, but more than only a couple years. And the league's a lot different now. He didn't play with anyone like a Mahomes or a Lamar back when he was playing. And I think he's going to have a rude awakening. Maybe he'll get invited to a nice, preseason camp, but that's as far as he's gotten in baseball, and he's not getting any further in football.
Can I counter that point for a second, if you don't mind?
Go ahead.
Because I do see a little bit difference. And yes, I guess you could say I'm a big Tim Tebow fan, but I see this being a little bit different, if I'm being honest. And it's not the aspect of him being a tight end. If there's anyone that knows Urban Meyer better, it's Tim Tebow. These two have gotten along and still get along and have a wonderful relationship very, very well. And I understand that you can make the argument, well, yeah, sure. You can add Tim Tebow then to the coaching staff. But if anyone knows the athleticism of Tim Tebow and the special things, especially that he did in college football, and I understand Tim Tebow at 33 is not Tim Tebow that we saw at 20. But there's a lot of things that Urban Meyer got out of Tim Tebow that I truthfully believe that he thinks he can get out of Tim Tebow, even if it's not at the quarterback position. But I do want to bring this one point as well. Again, what you see at baseball is much different. And I think that Tim Tebow is an athlete. I think there's ways. Yes, he wasn't a good thrower. He had a noodle arm at best. But you can't ignore his ability to run around in the pocket when he was younger. And I know he can't do that now, but there was ways in that he was versatile, especially running the football, hence where half of his touchdowns came from. I could see him being a Taysom Hill-like player, believe it or not, in the NFL. The thing is here, though, where I think Tim Tebow serves the most important role if he's to become a Jacksonville Jaguar is because he becomes like a Josh McCown. He becomes just like any other veteran that found themselves on a roster trying to teach quarterbacks and make them understand the system. And I know Tebow's not the quarterback anymore, but like Kellen Moore, even for example, he can teach players how to understand the system, get comfortable, hold accountability. And I think that's where I buy into the Tim Tebow situation a little bit, because yes, this isn't just a full factor of him being a tight end. I think Tebow even has the ability to block because of his size. I think that's another thing we have to remember. And I'm not saying he's going to be an elite tight end by any means, but he can play the position, I think, even if it's not to an elite level, and he can have a massive impact development on Jacksonville Jaguars.
It's been
Tim,
years.
Well,
go ahead, Frank.
I can't even. You said two things. I want to touch on one thing. You compare him to Josh McCown as being a teacher. How's Johnny Manziel? How's he doing in his foreign football league? How is Darnold doing? How are the Jets doing? Thank you very much. Also, Urban Meyer, when you're saying what he thinks, I get that he's been a great coach, but he thinks the Jaguars are becoming a Super Bowl team off of just Trevor Lawrence. He is, but we're going to Super Bowl. We're getting a ring. Urban Meyer, what he thinks about Tim Tebow is not affecting anything in how he's playing. You just called him a Jacksonville Jaguar. I think in that brings him down 63 notches for that. Also, in addition, we're talking about Tim Tebow. We're talking about college football over a decade ago. College football over a decade ago was a lot different than it is now. College football has gotten more competitive as things go on. Going into now, different teams were competitive. I know Rahill and I both had the same reaction where we were like, when is Tim going to stop talking? Because you're almost as bad as me with my Brady losing in the Super Bowl things. Rahill, I need to hear what you were thinking.
I'm not saying he's going to be a good player, Zoe. I'm just saying the fact that there is leadership. And, you took a shot at Josh McCown, but let's not take a full shot at Josh McCown for one reason. I understand what the Jets were, but you can't look at the Jets because the fact of the matter is they never had a damn wide receiver worth a dang. So you can't forget that. The Browns are one of the worst organizations to ever live. And you look at his other backup jobs. I mean, the fact of the matter is Josh McCown was a leader. And the fact of the matter is he did teach football play.
He was a leader in teaching Sam Darnold how to flip his hair from that one clip, but that's about all he did.
Well,
I seem to think Josh McCown, from a learning perspective, made things a little bit better.
All right, Frank's is we're going to go here. Go ahead.
I've been holding this back. That Josh McCown comment still probably one of the longest tenured and, in my opinion, greatest second or third string quarterback ever. I'm just going to go ahead and put that out there, in my opinion. But also, let's look at this. You took a shot at Jacksonville. I'm not a Jacksonville fan, but let's look at their division. Indianapolis, they're from falling apart as far as offensively, because you bring in Carson Wentz, you don't know how he's going to perform in that offense, even though he's being matched up with the same coaches that when they went on that Super Bowl run, he couldn't stay healthy, and, of course, getting beat out by Jalen Hurts. You're going to Houston, like you're playing against Houston 2 times a year, which I don't even want to talk about that dumpster fire. And then Tennessee is your only competition, and it's hit or miss if they're good or not each year. And then also looking at Tebow, everybody forgets he had college offers to go play tight end. He played tight end in high school before he switched to quarterback. He took snaps at tight end when he was at Florida in that similar position.
How many years ago was he the tight end?
I mean, it was a few years ago, but still,
I
let's.
think it was a little bit more than a few.
Okay. Well, hold on. Hold on. Let me.
I ask this one question though. How old
Yeah.
was Taysom Hill when he started playing tight end in the NFL?
I mean that is a fairly good point as well. They're around that same point. Tim Tebow also has experience at what position? Tight end in that offense of Urban Meyer. He took snaps there while he was a freshman at Florida as a backup quarterback. And then you also look at, once again, he was a quarterback in Urban Meyer's system. Who are they bringing in? Rookie Trevor Lawrence. That is a great transition period. He can help smooth things over in what Trevor has to learn and stuff. Well, as a coach,
yeah,
as a player coach, that it's perfect in my opinion. I mean, I think it's a better move than what people are giving credit for if they were to bring him in. He may not even be, he be a third string guy if he's lucky. But I mean, he's going to be one of those set players if they feel comfortable enough and he gets back in enough physical shape to where he can go out there and play football. I think it's a genius move that everybody just wants to hate on. I mean, I love it.
You have 52 players on a roster. You have 52 players. Why do you bring him in as a player coach if he's only being used as a coach? That's my only thing. He can give valuable advice, and I'm not saying anything against that, but you don't bring him in as a player and use up one of those spots on your roster if he's going to help out Trevor Lawrence a little bit and he knows he's buddy with Urban Meyer. That's not going to save them from anything.
Okay, I gotta add in. I'm gonna let Rahill talk in a second because I've seen Rahill shaking his head for the last 8 minutes. But one thing I just have to say. First off, with Josh McCown. First of all, as an Eagle fan, I'm a little biased that he almost beat the Seahawks at 40 years old, putting his body on the line. I'm not going to be critical on him, and I'm not going to be too critical on Tebow. But the big distinction you're talking about, Taysom Hill did not have a 6-year gap between playing any football whatsoever. After Tim Tebow left the Jets, he goes to ABC. He's introducing Sabrina Carpenter singing in front of the Cinderella Castle every Christmas, and then goes and tries to play baseball and can't play in the outfield with the Mets and can't get above Double-A. So not a shot at Tim Tebow. Yes, he's a great quarterback. He won the Heisman twice. He was a top pick, and he won playoff games with Denver. But that's a long time ago. He has intangible benefits. He has that relationship with Urban Meyer. But putting him on the field, if he proves himself, sure, give him the opportunity. I just don't see that happening. But Rahill, I got to get to you because you've been like waving around like one of those things you'll see outside a car wash for the last 10 minutes. So what do you have to say here?
Tim Tebow seems like a lovely guy. I've seen him talk on TV. He's great. You know what? He can be a college football analyst. He knows his stuff. He seems very polite, but no, I'm sorry. It's just not going to happen. Now, whether you want to keep him as I do think he does offer valuable advice for younger quarterbacks. I mean, let's not discredit him. He did win 3 national championships. I'm pretty sure he won 3 national championships at Florida. He was an unbelievable college prospect, and Urban Meyer did bring a lot out of him. Tim does have that point. And I do think he could offer valuable advice for guys like Trevor Lawrence and younger players. But as far as getting out there on the field, no. Why are we having this discussion? No. To me, it's just not going to happen. I mean, whether he wants to go be a coach, he can do that. Or a person, I just think he should just be a college football analyst. He knows his stuff. He's good in front of the camera. Let him do that. As far as getting out there on the field again, even in preseason, it's not going to happen. No, it's just a no for me.
Well, it's definitely unique what the Jaguars are doing with Urban Meyer coming in, really relying on the college game. Like we talked about on your podcast, Rahill, the college game doesn't necessarily determine how solid a player is. That's why Devontae Smith slipped in this draft, for example, despite winning the Heisman Trophy in college. You can name numerous examples, like other quarterbacks who played against FCS or Division II competition or Ivy League competition, like Ryan Fitzpatrick, and still carved out an NFL career. But that's going to be where we leave this episode. First of all, great to have a couple of our contributors. First, I'm going to go to Joshua Franks. Where can people see your podcast?
Well, you can go and follow us on Twitch at Experts of Racing. You can also see us on YouTube. We post a lot of our content on there as well. The Experts of Racing Sportscast is where you can find us. You can follow me on Twitter at Expert Racing for all live updates of when we go live. And also, just a shout out real quick to our new sponsor, everybody at drivefordibetiesawareness.org. make sure to go follow them and support Lacey Cool. Luckily enough, we'll be going on her Legends car and her fire suit as an official graphics and podcast partnership with them as she works her way up through the NASCAR ladder and trying to go and be a part of NASCAR Drive for Diversity. So we're thankful to be partnering with them, and we're excited to see where things go. So while you go support us, be sure to go support them as well.
Awesome to hear. Rahill, where can people check out your show?
The main destination is definitely Spotify. Just type in Nothing But Sports. It should be the second or third option that shows up. Also, if you go to my Instagram, which is just Rahill Jaiswal, no spaces, no undercases, no capitals, it'll be the link in my bio, so you can go there, check it out. Just give it a listen. That's all I ask.
Well, awesome. Really appreciate both of you and Zoe Alter for joining us today. Next week, Tim and I will be previewing the Major League Wiffle Ball season. So excited to talk about that, along with all the latest news in the MLB, NBA, and anything else with this Aaron Rodgers fiasco in the NFL. But until next time, signing off. We hope you have a great rest of your weekend. I'm Eddie Kalegi.
And I'm Tim Moore.
Signing off here on Sports Speak. Have a great night.